Okay, good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm really thrilled and excited to have with me as my guest Dr. Merritt Moore, who's a quantum physicist and a professional ballerina. Merritt, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Fun to be here.
So, Merritt, I'm so interested about how you have combined these two areas of passion. But let me start, since I was an engineer from Caltech myself, let me start with your interest in physics and what you studied as an undergrad first.
Yeah, so undergrad, I was at Harvard studying physics, and I had the amazing opportunity to work in the lab with Charlie Marcus, who was working, it was condensed matter physics, like quantum, but in the condensed matter realm. And I had a super cool project, which was it was discovering, investigating, exploring Majorana fermions.
Huh.
So it was this, yeah, it was so fun because it was like the race to find, there was all these articles coming out, like the race to find the Majorana fermion. And the experiment that I was working with, like we had these chips that were then sent to Copenhagen. Copenhagen then deposited nanowires, indium arsenide nanowires on it. It was then shipped back to me. I would then design on like design CAD the electrodes that would go onto it, go into the clean room. It was amazing, where you have to get all suited up, like goggles, face, everything's gloves, the whole shebang. And I would spend hours in the clean room, like then with the Elionics machine and the thermal evaporator, depositing these metal electrodes onto the nanowire. And then we were inducing a proximity effect to have the indium arsenide nanowire go to become superconducting. And then at the ends of the wire, we were exploring the electron density and trying to see if we could find these Majorana fermion. They come in pairs. And so the idea with this experiment is that they would be at the ends of this wire. And so it was super cool. Like for the first time exploring physics in an actual lab, I was so appreciative of my time there because Charlie Marcus really treated me like all the other graduate students. Everyone was there on weekends. Everyone was there like till 2 a.m.
Right.
And I became so like invested in these experiments. It was really cool.
Now, was physics something you always knew you wanted to study as a kid, or tell me a little bit about your interest in science going back a little bit?
So as a kid, I realized that my parents were very clever in a, I never knew that they were introducing science to me at all. So my father was an entertainment lawyer and my mom was stay at home. But like I now look back at my childhood and I'm like, oh yeah, our placemats had like periodic table on them. It's just like, yeah, they just, but I didn't even think anything of it. I was just like, oh cool, symbols. And my father would take us out at night and we'd play the game called Constellation, which is we would put up these constellation cards and like map out the constellations in the sky. And then while we're doing that, he'd ask questions like, oh, do you think there was just one Big Bang? Or were there multiple? Like, is there life out there? What's dark matter? So we just start feeding questions in our brain. And then my mother would take us to Caltech all the time to go see like Gertie's Guts and whatever crazy like exhibitions they had there about like science. And so we just go see museums. And so they kind of just fed in questions, but they never said, oh, you should be a scientist for this.
Right.
But
you must have been pretty good at, you must have been pretty good at science. It must have interested you. I mean, you don't go and study physics at Harvard if you weren't pretty good at it.
It's math. I definitely felt more inclined to math. I preferred math to words and writing. Like, oh my goodness, so much more. I was like, I love the crossing out. I love the patterns. I think also as a kid, my father made it super fun to do math. So we'd do like math flashcard game. Like, if I got them all right, there was never anything negative about it. If I didn't get it right, he's like, oh, next time, like we'll do it. Or like, well, let's do it again. And then if I got it all right, like we would be jumping on the bed. Like we had these two Great Danes, like they'd start running around. Like it was a full on, it was like a math party every night. So in that sense, I just always had this appreciation and I loved it. And then I didn't do physics until senior year because I'd taken my junior year abroad in Italy and they weren't offering science there. But I did pre-calc and AP Calc at the same time because they provided that. So I always did find math on. I do like that. I love patterns. I love that aspect of it. And
interesting. Your dad is introducing science. But he was a lawyer.
Yeah, entertainment lawyer.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
that's not okay. Not
no,
typical.
But I think they just wanted they wanted us because it was my sister and I. The girl, they really cared that they didn't care what we chose, but that we felt like we had the freedom and ability to do whatever we wanted, and that those doors were open. So I mean, I didn't realize while I was growing up, I was like, oh, this is normal. But I think they were very careful about what we were introduced to and the beliefs that we had in ourselves.
So then what happened? So then you went and got a PhD in physics, right? So you didn't stop there. You went on to do that. So you must have really liked it. I mean, most people don't get PhDs unless they really like the topic. Was your PhD thesis on the same stuff you did as an undergrad or something different?
I was debating whether to go to Yale and pursue more condensed matter, or at Oxford, I heard that they did really great quantum optics. And I just felt, I knew that, say I went down the path of academia, and if I did the exact same research that I did in undergrad, I only know that. I was like, oh my God, I might know everything about indium arsenide. But that's all I would know. So I wanted to jump to another field, and I did quantum optics. So it was exploring the quantum aspects of photons, single particles of light. So that was very fun.
Oh, interesting. And was your plan to go into academics or research after your PhD? What was your plan thinking going into your PhD?
So I kind of left it to see where it would go. So in between so I had done 2 years of Harvard, and then I did a year dancing professionally. Then I went back to Harvard. Then I danced professionally. Then I went back to Harvard. Then I did my PhD, and I danced professionally then. But I think in my head, at the end of my PhD, I was like, I might pursue research later. But I had decided right after college, there were the two options, whether to go down the professional ballet route or do my PhD first.
Oh, wow.
And I had decided to do my PhD because I was like, I don't really want to be sleeping on a couch in a lab in my 30s. Like I'm like in my 20s, I think it's okay. Like that was just my logic.
Yeah.
But I did, so right after my PhD, then I went hardcore into dancing because it was also such a big passion of mine. And there's a expiration date to dancing.
Yeah, right.
So I was already quite late. I'd had amazing experiences, but I also felt like, there's a ticking clock and I only have so many more years. So then I jumped to dancing.
So you'd obviously danced all through your childhood, right? I mean, obviously you must have been a dancer. You don't just jump in to become a professional ballerina.
I started when I was 12, 13.
Oh, which is quite late. That's quite late, yeah.
Quite late. So I never thought I would dance professionally. I didn't really think I would make it, but the other part of me was like, but maybe I can make it if I put everything into it. So I was studying all of my physics books in the splits. Like my roommate never saw me sit in a chair. Like I think she came in, we'd been roommates for like 4 years. She came in and she was like, Merritt, what happened? You're sitting in a chair. Like, because normally I have like a leg up on a desk and I'm holding it like this, or like a leg in the doorway, or I mean, that's just how it was. So I just went super intensely. I had amazing coaches, and during college I had amazing opportunities to perform, and I was just very nutty back then, and it was physics or dance. Like you never saw me at a party. I never saw a movie during college. Like
Well, dancing, I mean, ballet dancing is so physically grueling. I mean, isn't it? I mean, it's just, I mean, I've interviewed other professional ballet dancers and I just know how grueling it is. So it's hard to believe that you're able to do that and study something like physics, which is also very grueling and demanding, at the same time.
It was, there were many times I was sleep deprived in my college years. I look back and I'm like, I could have slept more. It would have. Because the amount of time it took me to like learn something when I was sleep deprived, I was like, oh.
Yeah, interesting.
Anyways.
What is it about? I mean, do you think there's something similar between? Do you think there's something similar between ballet and dancing and physics that somehow why your brain or what ties the two things together in some way that makes you like both those things? Because they seem like very opposite things, but what do you think?
So they've definitely helped each other in multiple ways. So definitely like knowing the physics concept, like knowing moment of inertia, knowing projectile motion, like having done all these equations and with the center of masses. So a huge part in why I think I was able to excel in dance is because
you understood those.
I understood that. And I didn't have time in the studio, but when I was trying to fall asleep at night, I would always use that time to visualize myself dancing. And like knowing then all of those physics concepts, I think just helps me physically figure out where my body needs to be to implement that. And it was so strong, that visualization, that tool is like so strong that then in the dance, like I could improve really, really fast. And even now, like sometimes in company, it's weird, but like before a combination, I'll just quickly close my eyes and visualize myself. And you know, everyone talks about the power of visualization, but the power of visualization, when you actually know the physics behind it, is like immense. It's great. So in that sense, that was super helpful. And then the other things of, I think that the way physics is taught is very much like, here's the equation, here's the pattern, figure it, you know, just memorize the book. But there were like funny little competitions. They're like called Dance Your Ph.D. And I remember doing that for like the quantum photons. They're produced via this process called spontaneous barometric down conversion, and they're entangled. So the piece was called Entangled. But it just forced me, when I was creating the piece, to figure out, be like, oh, like where are those photons created in the crystal? Because a high-powered laser goes into a crystal, and the entangled pairs of photons are created. And it just made me think, like, I was like, yeah, because the dispersion would be different, whether it's produced in the beginning of the crystal, the middle, or the end. And it made me thinking about the overlap of the bandwidth, which made me think about the pump. And I just realized, I was like, this is how Einstein, like, we've like lost that aspect of visualizing, I think, physics, or having it taught in that way, which maybe not everyone likes, you know, everyone has their different way of learning. But like, I know they say like Einstein came up with special relativity by imagining himself as a photon on a light beam and like looking at the electromagnetic waves and looking forward and back. And like, he came up with it intuitively. Then he put it in math to persuade his colleagues. But at first it was an intuitive side of it. And I was like, oh, it's just a shame that that part of it is missing, I think, in the education of physics. Like, I would so much prefer a professor to like sit on his desk and just be like, let's just talk about it and like fun, like the concepts of it, rather than rewriting the equations that are in my book, but with errors on the board. Like the whole the way it's taught right now, I understand why a lot of people kind of are like, why? Out. I'm out.
Interesting. So now somehow you've managed to find this very, very interesting profession that actually combines the two. So tell me about what that is and how you came to figure out a way to combine these two.
So oddly, I think for a while I had been dreaming of a way in which the two could merge together. But I never, well, one is because I was like, I would love to sleep more. And so if the two could overlap, that would be great. But I kind of resisted the idea because I was worried if I combine like the art and science, then maybe like the art's not so good, or the science isn't so great. Like I felt like I would have to compromise on the excellence of it, and that bothered me. But I was dancing at Norwegian National Ballet, and a friend of a friend was working with robots, and I was like, oh, can I come hang out with the robot? So I would hang out after rehearsals, and I just loved the way that it was moving. It moved so elegantly, and this is a cobot. It's a collaborative robot. It's just kind of like this industrial robotic arm. It has 6 joints, no arms, no legs. So you wouldn't really look at it and be like, "Ooh, dance partner."
Right.
But being a ballet bunhead, I was like, "Ooh, It's funny. And then it was right before the pandemic, and I couldn't dance with humans. Everything got shut down. I couldn't even dance like normally dancers. We all trained together. Those were all canceled. And I was thinking, I was like, but robots don't get COVID. maybe I can bring that robot and like dance with me. So begged the robot company, Universal Robotics. A huge shout out to them, and was lent the robot for 2 weeks. And during those 2 weeks, I just did like little mini dances, because Instagram Reels was happening, and those were going viral, like million views, 14 million views, etc. And then Universal Robotics, they were super great, and they were like, oh, okay, Merritt, you can keep the robot for a little bit longer. And so then I was creating longer length pieces, like all by myself during the pandemic. And then, yeah, it kind of took off. America's Got Talent had me fly out and do that. It wasn't aired, but just the opportunity. It was the first time I did it live. I got the 4 yeses from all the judges, and then performed it for a Forbes event in Germany, Boston Ballet, Harvard, where Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla were there, and then in Switzerland, and now I'm here in Bucharest, LA, later this week.
That's amazing. So, and you programmed the robot, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yourself.
So yeah, and to Universal Robots' credit, you can program it. It's not very complicated.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I program it myself, but I think it gave me, my physics background obviously gave me the confidence, where I was like, oh my God, we were working with equipment that was not meant to be together. There was no manual. Like, it's a single photon detector that's at minus 273 Celsius. It never worked. Like, I was like, a robot with a manual? We got this. And there are people I can call up. Like, so I think from that aspect, definitely my PhD helped in the sense of like, just like confidence, where I was like, we got this. Like, there's no problem.
So now you perform this ballet show with the robot. How long is the program?
So I generally create a new piece for each show. Although, yeah, tomorrow I'll do one that I did in Switzerland 2 weeks ago, and it'll be each piece. So in Switzerland, I did 3 different pieces. They're each about 5 minutes long. And before that, I had done another piece in Boston. So working though on a big production. Yeah. Hopefully. Yeah. And bringing it all together.
They're performed with music, right? I'm assuming you have music also. Yeah. Interesting. And then how long to make a 5-minute performance, how long does that take you to work out the choreograph and the robot, and how much time does that take?
It always takes longer than I anticipate.
Sure.
So in the beginning, I'm getting faster. In the beginning, for a 15-second video that I would post online, from beginning to end, it would take me about 7 hours. Wow. It was because it's at first it's like, as a human, we've got elbows and knees and joints and shoulders and head. Yeah. But this thing doesn't have arms and it doesn't have legs. So how do you make it reflect a human? Takes a little bit of puzzling. I love that part. Yeah. Like for instance, like what part is the hit? Like, how am I going to make this reflect me as best as possible? I loved puzzles as a kid, so it taps into my like inner child. I'm like, puzzling. And then sequencing it, and then the part that takes quite a while as the artist is the timing, because it would be very robotic if it just hit every count like that. Right. But I'll have it like, I have to play around with that holding and then moving fast and then slowing down, because it also doesn't have an acceleration. It has a constant velocity. So it's how to play with it so that it does look like it's dancing. Yeah. It takes a lot of time. Yeah. And that's the part that I like. And I think that's the part that it's great as an artist to have the ability to control that. Because I think a lot of the times, if there's a collaboration and the 2 separate people, Like no programmer is going to want to sit with me for 7 hours
Yeah, right.
or even an hour, because I will spend an hour on 2 seconds of a dance, like to make sure that 2 seconds is right. And no one else, no one else is going to do it. But I personally, and I think that's what makes the videos and the dances work, is because I spend, that artist time to make sure it works.
But it seems like you have it's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem in the sense of, do you program the robot first, then you start dancing, or do you start dancing and then you kind of figure out what the robot's going to do? Or how do you do that?
Yeah, it's combo. Yeah, sometimes it's a mix. I always generally have a iPad up and I film, and sometimes I have it go and I follow it, or I go and I'll just see. It's kind of when I film it, I look at like who's dancing better, robot or myself, and then I'll either shift to dance more like the robot, or the robot, I'll have it programmed to shift to dance more like me.
Well, since ballet dancing is such an intimate kind of art form, do you almost like anthropomorphize that robot? I mean, does the robot almost seem like you're, almost like an animal, or almost like a sentient being to you in some ways, because you're interacting with it so closely and so choreographed, right?
Often, yeah. So sometimes it'll be like my salsa partner. It'll be, I'll do various types of dances with it. And in a weird way, like during the pandemic, I don't think I would have stayed, because I was able to get access to this deserted theater, like this rundown theater. I think I would have been spooked out just to be there all by myself from like 7 a.m. to midnight.
Yeah.
But like having a robot there, it was kind of my companion. Yeah, so it kept me company in a weird way, where I was like, I was just there and it's moving too, and it was keeping me company. But I do actually really enjoy dancing with the robot. I think with humans, of course, there's like, you always feel what they're sensing and you're vibing with them, especially for improvisation. With the robot, because it makes me just be more focused on like where am I at the moment in terms of if I try to improvise. And then there's a lot of some of my most personal vulnerable pieces I've done have been with the robot, and the reason is because, for instance, if I dance with another human, they embody exactly who they are, but the robot can sort of embody a memory, or like the future self, or like, for instance, my mother passed away 10 years ago, and so for me, I can create a super vulnerable piece with the robot where it's not just it's memories of her or whatever I'd want to be saying to her, or angel figure, whatever that is. But it's like the most vulnerable piece I've done, and it's something that I can't really do with another human. Because no human's ever gonna embody that.
Well, the other thing too that I was thinking is that in terms of having a dance partner, I mean, the nice thing with the robot, it's completely reliable. It doesn't get tired. I mean, you can practice with it as much or as little as you want. I mean, it's it never makes mistakes.
That was one of the pluses. When I was like, mistakes. It never shows up hungover.
Yeah, exactly.
It never wants a break.
Yeah, exactly.
It's never lazy.
Yeah, it doesn't get sick. It'll never show up on the night when not feeling well. That's never, so it is, you definitely remove a lot of variables.
But then I'll be like, but then I've realized it's hard for me to ask for a break. So now that the robot's like, I'm like, oh, this is actually terrible. Because I'll normally go until someone else says, let's have a break.
Yeah, right.
But this robot is never asking for a break.
So is the company that made the robot, I mean, they never probably dreamed it was going to be used for this purpose, right?
Right. Yeah. Universal Robots. Huge shout out to Universal Robots.
Yeah. They must be just amazed what you've done with this robot, that they probably never.
I think a bit confused, just being like, what is going? Is she still going?
So funny. So funny. Yeah. Well, what do you think? I mean, this sounds amazing. I'm gonna have to go and watch some of your videos now. But What do you think about I mean, like, is there going to be a limit on how much you can do with the robot, or do you think that this could go on? I mean, I realize you're just early in this, and I'm sure you're still kind of smart, but do you feel like this is really limitless, or at some point there's going to be a limitation of what you can do with this robot?
I think it's limitless, and I really think it's the beginning, just the beginning,
Yeah.
because already one, it's super fun, is because I then get asked to play around with like different robots or attachments like the clamps to the robot or
Yeah,
the
right.
grippers, or there's a way in which you can use like a little HTC like the VCR, uh, the oh my
VR.
god, virtual VR. There we go.
Yeah.
We're going back in time. VR. Oh my goodness.
You're too young for VCR. You're too young for VCR.
Where did that come from? It's been a long day in interviews. So where you use the handset to make it follow your movements, then incorporating then Imogen he had like designed these gloves that when you move the gloves, you create music. And so I was working on a piece where I did that, and then amazing programmers Jose Garcia and Nick Jones, the composer, were working on how to use the gloves then to turn on the robot. Then there's someone who does these projection map. Like it's
endless.
Just beginning.
Yeah. What has been the reaction of the ballet dancing world? What is their response to this?
So at first, I mean, there were a couple people when I was first doing it, because I was doing Billie Eilish, I was doing Michael Jackson, in the pandemic, social media, and some people were like, "Oh, Merritt, what are you doing? Like, you're a professional ballet dancer, kind of like stay in your lane a little bit." And it took me aback. Like I remember there was like 2 weeks where I just took I was doing it every day, and then I took a pause. And at the end of the 2 weeks, I was like, "Wait, Matt, that's not like you. You don't listen to that. Like other people's opinions don't affect you." So I then just kind of pushed forward. And the actually most gratifying thing was Boston Ballet was hosting an event about innovation in tech, and they invited me to come and create a piece with the robots and a fellow dancer, and to be back at Boston Ballet, one of the most prestigious companies in the USA and the world, and doing that was just amazing.
Interesting. So has it gotten to a point where like ballet dancers are teaching how to dance to the robot, or hasn't quite got like that yet?
I think there are some dancers that are working on in the AI realm. I think that's interesting, and yeah, there are other kind of robot dancers. It's coming. It's coming. It's going to be coming fast and furious soon.
Yeah. Well, that's so cool. When you kind of, obviously you've been doing that for a little while. Do you ever kind of just take a step back and just not maybe marvel, but just kind of think about how you were able to combine these things in just such a unique way that, just like, wow, this fortune, lightning flash or something like that.
I definitely feel very, I'm like, this is so cool. The fact that I'm still dancing. Right. I mean, I've, especially from my past, like, because I wanted to be a good physicist, I've tried to quit dancing number of times, and it just keeps pulling me back. So the fact that I'm still dancing and with this and the robots, and it's just going, and then I'll be adjunct professor at NYU starting January, teaching a course on this. So it's laden me up. I'm very
Are you going to teach a course on robot dancing?
A course on robot and the creative practice, because I'm not sure if they'll be dancers.
Oh, interesting. Just using robots and
yeah, like I guess it should be like in technology, because we'll be working with a lot of things. But like if they want the robot to paint or play music, or they want to write a story about whatever, it's going to be very project based. I'm excited.
Well, I definitely think, if you were just a ballerina, even if you were interested, I agree, like you're not going to be able to hire somebody to help you program, this robot. It wouldn't work. I mean, it has to be you. So there are going to be very few people who can do that. I mean, programming is, I realize it's maybe easy compared to getting a PhD in physics, but it's still programming, and you've got to, understand that deep enough, to be able to do it. And as you said, no one's going to spend 2 hours, an hour on a 10-second, a 10-second segment to just make sure that timing is exactly right. And you couldn't even give instructions to somebody to do that, right? You have to do it because you've got it in your mind. So I totally agree.
So I love the opportunity to teach this to students, because for people who want to be art or whatever they want to do, I think knowing the technology is so important. Just to give that freedom of being able to express oneself however they want. If they want to go back to, just with the body, at least they know they're not limited to that.
Yeah. Well, Merritt, thank you so much for taking this time. I love how you've combined just art form and using technology, and you've got both the the technical side of you and this artistic side. Anyways, it's been such an enjoyable conversation. I really appreciate your taking the time to chat with me.
Thank you so much for having me on.
This is Richard Hsu and Merritt Moore. Thanks.